after a good thorough analysis on that for a discussion at that point in time. Today's intention is just to receive the report for planning purposes. So without unpacking it too much further, I'm happy to take some questions.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. So can you remind me, Mr. Gaylor, Chief Gaylor rather, what year is the capital project planned in?
Right. I'm probably going to need help in the background, but I believe in 2020, design and development is approved and planned with start for 2021.
Okay.
Yep.
So my question to administration is that, like, we see the numbers, the construction costs that are outlined here, as well as the soft costs as well. Will that number get more and more real as we get closer to the date? You know what I'm saying?
Yes. So at this point, this was a high-level consultant's estimate. I would not even classify this as a Class D estimate at this point.
Right.
So once we actually go to the point of doing the detailed design and we go out to tender, then the numbers will become much more real at that point. However, for the purposes which we want to start, which is to include this in the offsite levy update, which we will bring shortly, these numbers are sufficient, and they're sufficient for our planning purposes at this time.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that when we go and we sort of put our blessing on 2019 and 2020 budgets, that capital project number will be reflective of what we really think the project's going to cost.
Yes, and it may be that through the procurement process, once we have a better understanding of costs, we may need to make some additional decisions at that time based on what we might like compared to what we may be able to afford.
Wonderful. Thank you so kindly.
One question I have with this, there's talk of possibly selling the old fire hall. With the further analysis that's going to be provided during the 2019 budget review, are we going to have an option that's going to show if we sold it or repurposed it?
So at this point, the intent is to accept this plan for planning purposes. And then as part of the budget review that we will do in the fall, administration will bring forward actual recommendations around how to proceed, which site to choose, and how to move forward with the procurement. At this point, under the best case scenario, we're probably 3 or 4 years away from an actual relocation of the fire department. So it may be too soon at this point to be able to make an informed decision about whether or not to repurpose the existing building. But that will be a discussion that we will have to council, and it will be a decision that we will bring to council when it is appropriate.
Yeah, I was just curious if that would happen at the budget process, if we'd have any, like, as a side option kind of thing, but
no,
that makes sense. So
yes.
Any other questions? I'm seeing none. So with that, I will ask that council accept the fire hall study summary and technical reports for planning purposes. And just to reiterate, this is just for planning purposes. We're not going to really get into debating which option we think is better. We'll do that later. So would anyone like to speak to the motion? See none. I'll call a question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council.
And that leads us to, where am I? The last, where are we? Item H4, the Stewart Creek Phase 3 Community Lands. Mr. Fark.
My apologies for the delay. We have to now wait for the computer to allow me to log in.
Do you want to serenade us, or do you
I-
tell some jokes?
Nobody wants to hear me sing, and none of my jokes are appropriate for council. Yes. We- There we go. Okay, good morning, Deputy Mayor Hilsted and members of council. So I'm here to present today on the Steward Creek Phase 3 Community Lands discussion. So the motion that is in front of you is that council direct administration to transfer the community lands in Steward Creek Phase 3, Plan 1611360, Block 21, Lot 27, to the Canmore Community Housing Corporation for the purpose of the construction of perpetually affordable housing, and that council direct administration to transfer Lot 28, Block 21, Plan 1611360 to CCAC for the purpose of constructing perpetual affordable housing. So just to orient you on the map where we are talking about, this is Steward Creek Phase 3. So as you go past the Three Sisters Interchange and you go past the roundabout and the new development that is under construction there currently, there are the two adjacent lots. So the town received Lot 27 from Three Sisters in consideration for road allowance closure that was done in the area. And the intent of that land all along was to be transferred to the town for the purposes of, for community purposes. The second lot was Lot 28. That is the smaller parcel. That was part of the MR designation in the area. There are other MR parcels within Steward Creek Phase 3, so this is not the only MR parcel, but this was a portion of the MR. There are two relevant council motions related to this report. The first one is from Motion 162-2016. This was related to the 990 Wilson Way reconciliation issue, where a town that was meant to be, or a lot that was meant to be designated as MR within Peaks of Grassy, due to administrative error many years ago, did not receive that MR designation, and then council elected to purchase the lot in order to preserve the intent of MR rather than to see the lot be developed. So the motion from council was that council direct administration to pursue selling a portion of MR dedication in Steward Creek Phase 3, the proceeds of which would go to the cash in lieu reserve account. And then more recently, council, when we accepted the transfer of lands for Lot 27, council approved a motion to create a capital project called Community Lands Transfer Lot 27 for the town to provide payment for servicing costs in accordance with the settlement agreement up to a maximum of $297,000 and provide funding for the capital project from the Perpetually Affordable Housing Reserve. So council paid for the servicing of Lot 27 from the PAH Reserve with the intent of then allocating those lands for the purposes of affordable housing. So that is essentially the gist of it. We are here. We have ownership of both parcels now, and administration is now seeking council's direction in terms of how you would like to move forward with it. Administration is recommending that we transfer the lots together to CCHC for the purposes of affordable housing, as affordability and affordable housing remain strategic priorities of council. Administration certainly recognizes that council had given previous direction for the sale of Lot 28. The reason why we are recommending that the two parcels be considered together is when you look at the configuration there, Lot 28 is quite small, and it's an awkward configuration. So to develop that as a standalone parcel will be more challenging. It is currently zoned public use district, so it would require a land use change. Council would obviously have discretion in terms of what land use to confer on it, but it would be an awkward location. It would only, the lot is only sufficient in size for likely a small single-family home, potentially a duplex, but it would be quite challenging, and it would be an awkward location with access and visibility for that type of development. So the position of administration is it makes more sense to consolidate the two parcels together. It would allow for a larger development to occur that could take advantage of the size of both parcels combined. And for that reason, we are making the recommendation to consider the two of them together. Furthermore, the recommendation is to transfer the lands to CCHC. So it may be a number of years before the Three Sisters development fully develops out. But there is already affordable housing in the area. There is the MacArthur Place and Coyote Ridge that are both part of the PAH program that are in the Three Sisters area. And so certainly this is a not inappropriate location for affordable housing. Although it may be some years before it may be a very desirable location for affordable housing. However, the administration's position is that the role of the town is to provide CCHC with a land bank essentially to work with, and then CCHC can plan development when they feel it's appropriate and according to the resources that they have. So the town doesn't need to dictate to CCHC when the land would be developed. It would be up to them to do that based on need and availability of resources. However, there is another consideration or an alternative that administration is presenting. So as an alternative, council could direct to sell lot 27 and 28 with the proceeds to go to the PAH reserve and the MR reserve respectively. That would respect the intent of the previous motion of council around selling the land to replenish the MR reserve for 990 Wilson Way. And then the money that goes into the PAH reserve could be used for the purposes of acquiring other lands for the purposes of affordable housing. So we are still talking about serving an affordable housing purpose. It would just be a question of whether or not selling these lands and using those funds to acquire other lands would allow for to meet another or more immediate affordable housing need. So that is certainly an alternative analysis or an alternative option that administration sees as also equally reasonable. We did discuss this with the CCHC board, whether or not they would prefer to take the land or they would prefer to take the proceeds. Given the uncertain timeline of the development for Three Sisters, the CCHC board did have a slight preference for selling the land and taking the proceeds to be applied to other potential opportunities. However, there was no direct motion from the board, and they saw the wisdom of both approaches as well. So this is essentially a decision for council to determine how you would like to proceed. Do we want to provide a land bank to CCHC, or do we want to provide financial resources to CCHC to acquire potentially other lands? There is another potential option as well. Council could request that CCHC provide some compensation for the land rather than having the town just provide the land to CCHC free of cost. So this would allow potentially for you to recover, for example, the funds to go to the MR reserve. Administration doesn't actually recommend this option, essentially because CCHC is, so the town is the sole shareholder of CCHC, and their operations are funded entirely by the town. So if we require them to factor in the proceeds, they would pass on those costs, obviously, as part of the development to their clients, which is fine. It would still be within the affordable range. But it is essentially just a way of moving money around. So if we give the land to them for free, then they require less money, less funds from the town in order to progress their other developments and their programs. If we require them to pay funding back to us, we'll see those requests come back in the future for additional funds to fund other projects. So it really doesn't result in a financial benefit or financial efficiency. From administration's perspective, it does create additional work. The only reason to pursue that option would be if council felt strongly about meeting the intent of the previous motion to replenish the MR reserve. So that concludes my presentation. With that, those are the motions before you, and I am happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Your Worship. by providing that land to CCHC, would that put them in a better position to contemplate rental housing on that land? Because there would be a land bank.
So the exact form of housing that the land on that parcel, or the housing on that parcel would take, would be up for CCHC to determine. So the size of the combined parcels under our density requirements within the land use bylaw would allow for a range of, say, between 10 and 14 units to be constructed. Whether or not CCHC would like those to be ownership units or rental units would be a decision for CCHC to take depending on the demand that they are seeing within their clients.
Okay. If we gave CCHC that land as part of a land bank, would they be able to turn around and sell it?
That is an interesting question. I suspect that they would, I mean, in theory, yes, potentially they could. That raises some interesting governance questions, though, I would say. So if council had provided them with a land bank with the intention of giving them a land bank to build, of course, and CCHC made a different decision, for example, to sell the land, assuming council had no concerns with that decision of CCHC, it would unlikely to be a problem. But if council disagreed with that decision, then council would have the opportunity to express that at a shareholders meeting, for example. Okay. So the short answer is technically yes, they would be providing the land to CCHC. Whether or not they would consider this motion of council to provide them the land as direction for them to use the land as opposed to sell the land would be a different type of discussion.
I think in the motion, though, it says for the purpose of the construction of perpetually affordable housing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So would that satisfy that?
So with this motion, my interpretation is that council is giving direction to CCHC that this is land to be used for the purposes of PAH. However, once CCHC has title of the land, they are an arm's length board, they could make a decision around if they decided to take a different direction. Again, as the shareholder of CCHC, council would have the opportunity to discuss that if they were unhappy with that decision. So again, I'm looking to Ms. DeSoto. It does raise a bit of a complicated governance issue. My interpretation is that this is direction to CCHC to develop the land as opposed to giving them the discretion. However, as they are arm's length, they would have an opportunity to make their own decision.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. So along Councillor Sanford's questions, I guess they could also come back to council with a really amazing business plan to build something else somewhere else that includes the sale of that land. And that would probably be the more organic way from a governance perspective to approach that. And I expect that that's how they would behave.
Certainly, CCHC would always have the option of coming back to council and indicating that if they did not wish to proceed with development on these lands, but wish to take the proceeds to apply to another project, they could always come back to council and either in a council meeting or again at a shareholder meeting to discuss their plans going forward.
I guess if we're basically providing them with some equity, whether it's in land or whether we sell it.
You're
right?
providing them with an asset.
An asset for
Right.
them to do with. Again, from a governance perspective, I can't imagine, like, we haven't seen crazy behavior out of the CCHC board, so I can't imagine them doing something like that without consulting with council first. I guess I'm getting into debate and I should stop.
What I would
Sorry.
suggest in answer to that question is that if council wishes to have the land used for the purpose of development, then to move forward with the motion. If council wishes to provide them with the flexibility, then there's always a cost involved, especially with multiple land transfers and that sort of thing. So if the town transfers the land to CCHC, there's going to be a cost involved in doing that. If CCHC then chooses to sell the land, there would be a cost involved in them doing that.
But I would
So-
expect there'd be a profit that would be attached to that as well, so.
Certainly,
yeah.
but what I'm
And that
suggesting.
could be off
Yeah,
into the future.
That's right. What I'm suggesting is there is a cost efficiency. If you're more interested in providing CCHC the flexibility to have cash to pursue projects as they feel is appropriate, then there's a cost efficiency in just directing administration to dispose of the land now and to provide the cash to CCHC. Because there's one less land transfer involved with less legal fees incurred in doing that.
And I would counter that if this happens in 3 years and the market increases and the market value that you're quoting in the document goes up by 10 or 15%, 20%, 30%, then that number is irrelevant.
Certainly, if CCHC held on to the
yeah,
land for a
for
period
sure.
of time and then
Yeah.
made a decision at a future date, that would
I
certainly
feel like
offset.
giving them the land actually provides them the most amount of flexibility. But anyways, that's my opinion. You've answered my question. Thank you very kindly.
Yeah, go for it.
So, so the one property is assessed at, or appraised rather, at 687,000, the second property at 357,000. And there's, within a motion, 296,000 that needs to be reimbursed as per the motion unless council decides otherwise. And 297,000 is the up to number for pre-servicing that land, which we've already
We've
paid for
yes.
through, I'm just trying to follow the bouncing ball.
Yes.
Through the
PAH reserve.
PAH reserve.
Yes.
So essentially, when and if those lots are developed, if CCHC were to develop, they would extract the pre-servicing within the home sale, like they do with all the other developments they have?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that. Thank you.
Yeah, so CCHC, in fact, what they would do is they would sell if they were an ownership model, they would sell the units at the PAH build rate, which is currently at $275 a square foot, and that would be sufficient to cover all of the servicing costs. If it was a purpose. It would be concluded with the rental model, but the advantage for them if it was a rental is that because these costs have already been paid, essentially their financing would be less, right? So the cost to finance the project would be lower because these costs have already been paid out of this PH reserve.
But they could capture them with the rents themselves.
They could, if they chose to do so, yes.
Councillor Sanford?
Thank you, Your Worship. These lands are zoned currently PD and community?
So let's go back up.
Something. Community.
Yeah. So the small parcel is Land PD, Public Use District, which I think council is very familiar with. It is essentially a holding district with some permitted and discretionary uses, but it's essentially planned for future development. The community lands are zoned R3, Steward Creek. So they have an R3 zoning on them currently, which is multifamily. He's going to correct me on PD. Yes.
Okay.
I knew it as soon as I heard his footsteps behind me. Yes.
So essentially, anything, if we advance these lands to CCHC, anything they wanted to do, it would require rezoning anyway, right?
So for the PD lot, it will require a land use change, absolutely. And it depends on, for lot 27, whether or not what they wanted to construct conformed with the R3 district or whether they wanted to do something different. But so at least a land use change for lot 28 will be required.
And that would have to come back to council.
As
for-
all land use
with a
changes
public
are,
hearing,
they
et
must
cetera.
come back to council and there will be a public hearing. That is correct.
Okay, so that essentially reduces the value of these properties until such time as they're developed
So the.
or rezoned.
No, not exactly. So for lot 27, it has land use currently. It has an R3 land use. So it can be developed today without any land use change required as long as the development conform with the R3 district. The PD, I mean, this assessment is based on its current land use as PD.
And that's low.
So it could change, the value of it, the assessed value of it could change depending on what it is rezoned to. It could go up, but it could also potentially go down if the land use that is proposed is more restrictive.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yes, and Alaric wants to clarify the definition of public use district. Come on, you go ahead.
Sorry, just for the clarity, I think everyone is clear, PD is not a holding district
Yes.
for future development. It is a public use district. It is largely things like parks and open spaces. It may include things like wastewater treatment plants or lift stations or other things.
Yes.
I think everyone knows that. Just want to be clear.
Yes.
Sorry.
Mea culpa.
Well, everyone but
Yes.
Mr. Fark, I guess.
Yes. Yes. Sorry, my apologies.
That's okay. Mr. Fish has your back, so.
Yes.
Are there any other questions at this time? I'm seeing none. Thank you for your presentation. So with that, I think we'll direct council, or direct administration to transfer the community lands in Stewart Creek Phase 3, SCP3, Plan 1611360, Block 21, Lot 27, to the Canmore Community Housing Corporation for the purpose of the construction of perpetual affordable housing. Should we do this two separate motions, or is it? Okay. So, starting with that one. Anyone want to speak to that motion? Councillor McCallum.
Jesus, I'm chatty. Although I think there's a thinking that perhaps the most amount of flexibility and value comes in selling these lands, I believe that that actually occurs in holding them. So if we are going to look at selling these lands for the $1,044,000, and we stick that money, and CCHC sticks that money in a bank account, it's not going to increase in value over time as sitting on that land will, if that is their choice to sell it. I think that it would actually be a great location for perpetually affordable housing. I think it would be actually a great mixed use or mixed income project too. There's a lot of opportunities, but I believe that, and I trust the board, that if they were any changes moving forward, that they wanted to sell that land, that they would have a business plan available and they would come to council with really good reasoning as to why they want to do so. So therefore, I will be happy to support the motion as presented.
Thank you. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I would be happy to support this motion. I think, as Councillor McCallum said, giving CCHC the most flexibility to do what they think is best is a good direction. Also, these lands are zoned for particular purposes right now. They would have to go through a rezoning process. So there's a couple of steps of oversight here that I think help us to be confident that what we expect to happen will happen with this land, and CCHC can perhaps come up with a great plan. So look forward to that. I will support it.
Thank you. Councillor Comfort.
It seems like the right thing to do to build a land bank and to encourage projects. As we know, we're still far away from filling the need for affordable housing at various levels, and I think we need to continue down this path. So happy to support the motion.
I will also support this motion for many of the same reasons that have already been stated. Building a land bank for CCHC, I think, is a good idea. It does give them the flexibility to, get creative. If they need to come back with a land use change, they will. So I will support this motion as well. Any further comments? All right, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And then I will direct that council direct administration transfer lot 28, block 21, plan 1611360 to CCHC for the purpose of constructing PAH housing. Any comments on that? Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to see this awkward little piece of land be put together with a larger piece of land, because that gives, again, CCHC more flexibility. I think it's also a nice segue into inclusionary zoning in a neighborhood like Steward Creek, because this will provide housing for another sector of the population, which we know we need. So I think that'll be a nice way to work through some of the inclusiveness in the neighborhood and give CCHG some opportunity to do that with a larger piece of land, up to 14 units, as it says, for perpetually affordable. So I will support it.
Anyone else speaking to the motion? Then with that, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And then that leaves us to an in-camera item. Does anyone need a bathroom break before we go to that? Absolutely. Okay, then I'll call a short 10-minute break. So our next item is L1, mass transit options. It's an in-camera item because recommendation is council to take the meeting in camera to prevent disclosure of third-party business information in accordance with Section 16(1) of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. So I will move that council go in camera. All those in favor? We're in camera. Now that we're out of camera, move to adjourn today's meeting. Those in favor? We're adjourned.
Well done, Jeff.